Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming in. This is the first of our brown bag series for Clean Cities in the TRC. My name is Abby Matera and I am the Vermont Clean Cities Coordinator. If you haven't heard of Clean Cities, it's a program of the Department of Energy. And there's 85 coalitions across the country that work to reduce our consumption of petroleum in the transportation sector. So we're really excited to be able to offer this panel on teleworking today. It's obviously a really important way of reducing petroleum consumption. I went ahead and looked up a statistic that I thought was interesting to share. So if those in the US who could have teleworking compatible jobs, which is about 50% of our workforce, and those who wanted to work at home, so from that 50% of our workforce, 79% would like to be able to work at home. And if those 79% did work from home just half the time, we would save 640 million barrels of oil, which represents 37% of our Persian Gulf imports, which is valued at about $64 billion. So it's quite a big number. So this is a really relevant subject for Clean Cities, among other groups. So a couple things I wanted to share on the state level. There was a lot of teleworking discussion that happened in response to Hurricane Irene, because a lot of workers got displaced, but there wasn't a teleworking policy in place. So in the 2011 session, the AOT, Human Services, and Department of Buildings and General Services were required to create a report to cover the extent of which their employees could telecommute, and then what that telecommuting behavior would have on the inventory of state buildings. So from this report, they found that 69% of AOT and AHS positions would be appropriate for teleworking on a consistent basis. It's a pretty significant piece of our workforce. So here in Vermont, the state teleworking policy actually came out in February of 2012. And then an interesting thing happened in 2014. The state of Vermont passed a law that gave employees, all Vermont employees, the right to ask about flexibility in their work schedules. So this includes teleworking. So what we're looking at about now is our small firms. 10% of them allow teleworking currently. Our bigger firms, so 250 plus in employee size, have about 29% of them are allowing teleworking. And our last consensus showed about 7% of Vermonters telework, which is up from our national average of 4.4%. So the trends nationally, they're expecting by next year, 4 out of 10 US professionals will be teleworking at least part of the time. And a lot of this push is happening from the younger generation insisting on teleworking being a part of their employer purview. This is especially important here in Vermont. We spend 61.88 million hours a year commuting to our jobs. As we know, 3/4 of us are commuting alone. We only have 1 in 10 taking carpool. And then the 3/4 who are commuting, they actually have 2 or 3 cars at home. So there's many benefits to telecommuting. I'm going to open it up to our panel here to address the different ways they've implemented telecommuting policies and the results of those policies. So of our speakers today, we have Tim Shea, who is the Associate VP of Facilities Purchasing and Contracting from National Life Group. We have Jennifer Chiodo, who's a Managing Principal at CX Associates. And we have Erica Schramm, who is the Director of Administrative Services from the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. So we'll go ahead and just move from Tim down the panel, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay.
So thank you. So our program at National Life Group is more than just a telecommuting program. So what we did there, created, it was in 2007, was an alternate transportation program. And just to give some additional numbers, so we've got a campus of about, at this time, about 2,000 building occupants. And on our campus, we have about 1,600 parking spaces. So simple numbers game is we're minus 400 spaces if everyone brought their own vehicle onto our campus. So it's much more efficient and fiscally responsible for us to figure out how to not build more parking spaces. We've been to our campus, it's up on top of the hill. There's not an easy place to add additional parking. To build a parking garage is about $30,000 per space, so even 100 spaces is several millions of dollars. So not something that we're interested in doing. So we created the alternate transportation program to encourage people to either work from home, carpool, public transportation, walk or bike, and now vanpool to our campus. So the program, as it started in 2007, has since grown. We have, just using some rough numbers, about 1,000 people participating, eligible for the program. And any given month that we track it, well over 200 people are participating. So 20% participation rate. How the program works is an employee fills out a scorecard. It's just simply a fillable PDF. It's all based on the honor system. One of the assumption is that we trust our employees to have integrity and to fill this out with accurate information. So depending on the mode they use, whether it's using public transportation, walk, bike, carpool, or work from home, they fill out that mode on there. And then based on the amount of participation that they fill out and basically use throughout the month, if they average at least one round trip per week throughout the month, they will then get an incentive for participating in the program. So a bus pass for those taking public transportation based on the routes that they're taking. There's 4 different routes that they're eligible for, whether it's using CCTA or GMTA. We'll give a bus pass for 10 free punches. If they're a carpool driver, they'll get a gas card to reimburse them, $25 gas card. If they walk or bike to work, they'll get a gift certificate to Onion River Sports, and $25. So, we are spending that money, National Line is spending that money locally, supporting local business as well as encouraging people for that. If they work from home, they're entered into a drawing for promotional items. Anything from umbrellas to jackets to backpacks and such with National Life Group logo products. So it's fairly easy to manage. It takes about 2 hours for one of the employees in my group to facilitate the receiving the scorecards and dispersing the incentives out for up to 200 people. So it's not a terribly tedious, by no means someone's full-time job to administer it. It's all handled through an email distribution list, and then electronically those are submitted. And then what we have them fill out as well is how many miles they averted by using their modes of transportation. In a given month, we avert about 75,000 miles of single occupancy vehicle travel in Vermont. So we also have an office in Dallas, the Dallas Metroplex area. Those people are also commingled in there. So it's a pretty substantial impact. And as I mentioned originally, we also are averting that number of vehicles coming to our campus that we, in all reality, don't have space for. So that, it's what the program entails. We, based on some degree seasonally, more so the price of fuel oil will dictate the participation. There are a number of people that as the gas prices go up, or as we've seen more recently down, the numbers will drop or increase. So selfishly, I want those gas prices to be higher because people are well aware of the costs and the impacts to them from a financial perspective. So it does fluctuate quite a bit in that regard. And as people get more comfortable with taking the bus, whether they do it 1 day a week or all 5 van pools as well, we've seen just the word of mouth and the comfort, the peace of mind, the social aspects have increased the participation as well. Thanks.
Great. Well, so CX Associates is a small consulting engineering firm based here in Burlington. And so we have 10 people. We're right downtown, a block away from City Hall. And so, as you might imagine, parking, again, is an issue. And we opened that office in 2006. And our policy up until I think it was 2009 maybe, was we would pay for parking for employees. So we would rent parking parking spots. And then as we were talking about kind of what our mission is and our commitment, we work on building energy performance and lead consulting. So we realized that our parking policy wasn't actually consistent with our mission and the goals that we were actually trying to achieve. And our operations manager came up with a green incentives policy, so a little bit similar to National Life in that it was more comprehensive. And he was really excited about it, and the partners supported it, and we said, you know, great, bring it to the staff. And as I said, we were paying for parking spots. Well, this new policy was not going to pay for parking spots. And whenever one is creating policy that's going to affect the benefits of employees, one should expect some serious backlash. So, so rather than embracing the new green policy, we had particularly one employee without a parking spot who was just extremely unhappy and dissatisfied. So we backed up and we created a working group to try to come to a consensus about what a good policy would be. One of the things we ended up, and I actually recently, just like in the last 2 months, had an employee who was part of that committee come to me and say, so can I get the $75 on my pay for the parking spot, because I thought I would have a parking spot sometime in the future. I was like, wow, that was not something we ever talked about at the time. But in any case, so what we did is anybody who had a parking spot, we gave them a $75 pay increase, and then the cost of that parking, if they wanted to keep it, got deducted from their pay. So employees had to pay for parking. We provide free bus passes. We don't require any kind of documentation. We just come and get your bus pass. And then the telecommuting. So we have again, because we're small, you know, the computer aspect of it, how do you support this? And being an engineering firm, we work on pretty large files typically. So we made sure we have the infrastructure great downtown, being on Burlington Telecom, not so great out in the rest of Vermont, right? So that, to my mind, as you know, businesses and policymakers are looking to advance telecommuting, the telecommunication infrastructure to support that is a key component. So what I find when I'm working from home is that just the upload and download speeds from my house are slow and it's problematic. But what we do is we allow people who have been with us for at least 3 months to work from home 1 day a week. Because we're small and it's a pretty team environment, people tend to need to be there. If people need to be at home for reasons like my kids are off school this week, not a problem. They just work from home that week. So it's a very flexible work environment. And I think people really appreciate that and respond to that. We have a relatively new employee who actually, I just mentioned that I was coming here to speak, and he said, I love that policy. That's part of why I came forward to you. Because he has 2 small children at home, and he lives in Jericho. So the commute is long, it keeps him away from his kids. He said, when I work at home, I can have breakfast with my kids, lunch with my kids. They know not to bother me when I'm in my home office, and it's definitely a benefit that I really value. The other good thing from our perspective is we have a pretty liberal paid leave policy. So people get 30 to 35 days, depending on how long they've been with us, paid leave, whether it's sick, vacation, holiday. And so people don't really want to take it for sick days, right? They want to save it up and go have fun. And so they tend to come to work when they're sick. And that's not good because then we all get sick. So having the telecommuting policy is great because you can just say, you know, when you're sick, work from home. And people do that. And, you know, if you're sick and you want to work, that's fine. Stay home. Don't get the rest of us sick. So that's another, I think, significant advantage of it. We haven't done any tracking, and actually the conversations with Abby and hearing Tim talk a little bit about it made me realize we probably should. We have the majority of our employees actually live in Burlington. So most of them work in the office 5 days a week because they can walk or bike to the office, and they all do. I don't think any of them bus in. And then there's 4 of us who live further out, and 3 of us who live further out, we all telecommute 1 day a week. And then the other advantage of this policy is that our operations manager moved to Chicago in September. And so we were able to keep him rather than having to replace him. And he just works remotely, and he flies to Burlington 3 or 4 times a year to be with staff. So we have 1 full-time remote and 3 part-time remote, so 4 so I think that about covers what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. So I'm Erica Schramm, and I lead the administrative services team at Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. We have 300 people in most in Vermont, but we have about 50 employees in Washington, D.C., about 20 employees in Columbus, Ohio, and 5 employees in New Jersey. In Vermont, the vast majority of our employees work out of our Burlington office, but we do have a number of employees that work either in southern Vermont, central Vermont, or from home offices representing the whole state. We have a telework policy that's really connected with our flexible work schedule policy. And so we do have employees who telework as a condition of their employment. There are employees who live in the Northeast Kingdom or in southern Vermont, and we don't have an office for them to come to. And so they telework all the time. Most of those individuals are also working on a regular basis on customer sites, so they're traveling to customer sites in those regions. But our telework policy really comes into play in our commitment to providing staff with the opportunity to work in a flexible work environment that works best for them. And so we allow staff to telecommute as long as their job allows them to telecommute, as long as they have a relationship with their supervisor in their department, where the expectation is that they are just as productive and accessible working from an offsite location as they are working from an onsite location. So we leave a lot of flexibility and trust between employees and their supervisors. And we do track teleworking. We actually, because our mission is to reduce the economic and environmental cost of energy, we have greenhouse gas and environmental impact measures that we measure on an annual basis. And we measure both the good we do for the world, but we also measure reducing our carbon footprint as individuals and as business. And we do that by conducting an annual greenhouse gas survey, where we ask employees about their commuting patterns, about their personal travel patterns, about the ways and types of energy that they use at home, the types of food that they eat. And so we do a really comprehensive survey. But from that survey, we've identified that about 13% of our overall work days are considered telecommute days by staff. So just over 1 out of 10 days across the whole organization is considered a telecommute day. We actually double that number when we add in walking and bike riding. So 0 emission days, about 25% of our overall days are considered 0 emitting days. We also track carpooling and bus riding and mass transit in our DC office, folks who take the metro. And I don't have that statistic in front of me, but it's closer in the upwards of about 40% of our overall commuting trips are in something other than a single occupancy vehicle. I did some math yesterday. My team was really proud of me because I'm the admin director. I'm not our engineering director. If you take those 13% of telecommuting trips and you take our average fuel economy, and you take our average commuting distance, which is just over 15 miles across all of our locations, we've avoided 300,000 miles just with telecommuting, 600,000 miles when you bring in walking and biking. And that actually translates into, I just did my math, 50,000 miles a month for 0 emitting vehicles for our staff size, so about 300 people. Which saves 9,000 gallons on the telecommuting side alone of gas per year. So we've had a lot of success with the program, and I think, and when Abby asked me to speak at the panel, we have a lot of anecdotal feedback that says, oh, it's great, I'm able to work from home, it works. But I decided I wanted to just reach out to a few supervisors who have large numbers of their staff who telecommute, and I asked them to talk to me about their staff's level of productivity and their staff's level of engagement. And universally, for this sample population, about 40% of their staff telecommute on an average of 2 days a week, so pretty high frequency telecommuters. Universally, productivity was the same and in some cases slightly higher. And engagement, staff engagement overall was the same and in some cases slightly lower because people felt more disconnected from the overall workspace. But in those cases, supervisors have become aware of that trend and then they're actually trying to work with their teams to increase the level of engagement. But I think the most striking statistic is the productivity number, that really overall productivity is the same. And that our employees are doing the same work remotely. And to your point, having strong broadband connections or telecommunication connections are critical. And really our expectation with staff that they're just as productive when they're working remotely as when they're in the office has become an expectation as we think about our policies. And when that's in place, it's been a really effective policy for us.
Okay, thank you all so much. So do you have any questions?
So on the last point about the broadband, I didn't hear any of our panelists mention anything about compensation or providing support to get that broadband if available at home. Do you have policies for that?
Yeah, we do.
You do?
For those employees who telecommute as a condition of their employment. So not for the employee who chooses to work from home 1 day a week because it works best for them in their own personal situation, but rather for the employees who work in remote offices. We do reimburse them for all of their office expenses up to a certain level. And for those employees who telecommute, based upon a set schedule, perhaps not 100% of the time, but 50% of the time, we would reimburse for their office expenses up to the 50 at a prorated basis.
So for us, we wanted to be kind of clear that we didn't want to have the expense of 2 offices for each employee. So we provide all employees with laptops, which they're free to use for telecommuting or recommended or required. It's really no requirement, no enforcement, but that's what you should use. So everybody has their own laptop that they can use when they're working remotely, but we don't pay for their internet connection. There's kind of an assumption that professionals would regain that themselves anyway. But we do provide all of our employees with a $35 a month stipend towards their cell phones, because we expect to be able to access them on, for work-related things during the day. And in general, just polling employees, people really didn't want to have 2 cell phones, one for work.
I think I realized I really didn't talk about telecommuting much, but so nationally we have a couple of examples. I think the telecommuting becomes as much about the technology and how people access your systems. Bandwidth certainly comes into play, and it's for us it's really a business managerial decision to letting people do that. We did have one organization that had a couple hundred people in that division where it was. Mandate sounds a little strong. We'll say highly encourage that 1 day a week they work from home. And we recently redid that area. So when we built that area out with new workstations, we only put 80% of the workstations that they would need in that business area. So a couple of things there. One is we don't have to spend as much money on furniture. They take up a smaller footprint. We have more square footage for our growing business, fewer data ports, fewer computers, and then they, as a group, were organizing who was working from home. Not everyone wants to work from home on a Friday, but clearly that won't work. So they would, rotate through or figure that out. And that was a group that had well over 200 people in it, primarily contractors for us in our IT area. But the technology becomes as much of the linchpin there. And then a lot of people want, I think we have to have a societal or a cultural shift that just because you can't see that person, that we have the systems or the monitoring or the assurance that they are working and that they are more productive. It's really difficult for some areas to measure productivity. They're not building something that you can say, okay, the guy working in the office did 6 of them and they did 7 at home. They're more efficient. That just isn't the kind of work that we're doing. So it's kind of hard. But having the comfort, the trust, and the systems in place, I think, is where we need to go. And it's clear it's not right for everyone. I manage the facilities area. I couldn't have a technician working from home. That's just there are some people clearly that do or are required to be hands-on. So I think this is as much about these kind of having conversations and getting people comfortable that it can work, and then being able to support it, whether it's broadband equipment. We do supply computers for people to have a second computer at home for them. We don't give them workstations in that, but we'll give them 2 monitors, a computer, and help them set that up and get them on their way as well.
Tim, as far as the coordination, you mentioned now that for this physical office space, you've got 80 seats, so you have to know that 20% is taking each day of the week. On the parking side of that, it sounds like it's not actively managed who is busing or carpooling. Are you just sufficiently oversubscribed that when someone makes a choice that it's going to be a single occupant day?
No, it's basically just hope it works out, to be honest. So yeah, we don't have anything that prescribes. And a lot of it depends on how many visitors we have as well. So if we have a big, large group that comes in with 50 people that bring their own car, it can get a little ugly there. So yeah, it's not managed to that level. And just we have half of our campus are tenants, primarily in the state of Vermont, that has 5 different groups, 5 different departments or entities, and then non-state tenants. So it's a melting pot for us. So it's just kind of, first come, first serve. And if it gets a little, we've had as few as 5 spaces empty, and there are people who are clearly angry driving around that parking lot that are looking for those 5 spaces. So
I may have been one of those people.
I'm keeping my eye on that apple and try to figure out which gateway to go. But yeah, so it is critical for us to use some alternate ways of encouraging that behavior.
Don't you say you got an office in Dallas?
We
like
do.
Texas.
Texas, yeah.
So presumably your company charges for parking in Dallas. Have you taught, I understand why you probably couldn't make a decision to charge for parking in Montpelier, but have you discussed it?
So our Dallas campus, to be honest, they're in a more enviable position than we are in Montpelier. They're in we lease about 2.5 floors of a 13-story building. We are the largest tenant in there, so we do have some leverage with. But parking is not an issue there. They have a parking garage. They built 1 building, but the parking garage was supposed to support 3 buildings, and right now there's no work being done there, so it's not an issue. It's clearly it's on one of those major, I don't even know, I go there, but it's some major interstate. But there's no cost for parking there. We have a certain number of reserved spots for people that work there 25 years, and some of the upper echelon, and the rest is up for grabs. It's not really an issue there. And it's in a parking garage undercover year round, so people are pretty happy. We have talked even on our campus about I have proposed even charging people $1 to come in and park. That wasn't well received, we could say, but I wanted at least some sort of fee to recognize that there is a cost. There's a cost to national life, there's a cost to the employee, and we'd have to work through that with with our tenants, primarily in the state of Vermont, to have them appreciate. But in Montpelier, we have a parking issue that gets discussed on a daily basis, or at least is top of mind for people on a daily basis. So we recognize that as well, and how we can help or hinder that.
So my background is kind of in disasters and emergency management. So I'm curious if your telecommuting policies took into account business continuity, continuity of operation should something happen, or even health and well-being, like you said, for illnesses.
And I can speak that one of my areas that I do oversee too is we call it business resiliency, but disaster recovery, business continuity planning. So it's absolutely part of our solution. So whether you're sitting in our office in Montpelier, you're in a Starbucks in Williston, you're in an airport in Phoenix, you're using the same system to access your information. So we've built our systems, your kind of, if you will, your entry point is innocuous or ambiguous to where you're sitting. You could be in Shanghai to Dallas, and So we have that inherently built into our business resiliency from an access perspective. Of course, it's all predicated on, bandwidth or good wireless service or whatever to access it, but that is inherent to our system. So if our building didn't exist, we would have, from an impact perspective, ideally, no disruption from an IT perspective.
Yeah, and I think for us, it definitely is a component, on a day-to-day basis, it's more likely to be people's illnesses, but, we've had a power outage and people can just go home and work from home. The server is our servers are on site, so, if we had a disaster at the site, that, it's backed up, but there would be a little bit of recovery time that people could work remotely. But yeah, in the event of something like a power outage or something, people are free to just
Snowstorm.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen here, but not today.
tomorrow.
Yeah, we're the same.
So I'm wondering about VIC's long distance travel relative to their daily travel. Do you find that perhaps those telecommuters are saving energy on the daily basis, but they're also the people who are jetting around the country representing, doing the work of the company as well? So it's really just a trade-off of where the energy is used?
We track that as well, and we are trying over time to reduce the impact of all of our travel. And we've done so. We had a peak when we opened our Ohio office and DC office in the same year. And we had a lot of individuals who very regularly were flying to Ohio and DC. And that year we absolutely saw a spike in our business travel. Beyond that, we're actually relatively steady and certainly monitoring it. So I don't think it's additive. I wouldn't call it it's not a trade-off. And so I think the people who are traveling are also the people who work who telecommute, as are the people who don't regularly travel. So it certainly doesn't offset it. Long distance travel and air travel is huge from the greenhouse gas standpoint. But I think it at least limits those people who are working in the office on the amount of travel that we do. We also have a lot of employees who, as all Vermonters do, who live 40, 50 miles away from where they work. And so it actually, from a productivity standpoint and certainly from an emissions standpoint, giving those individuals the flexibility to not come into the office every day has been really helpful for us.
I can talk to a little bit about that. So similar to we capture our carbon footprint as a business, everything from electricity to fuel oil, as well as air mile travels, hotel night stays, pieces of mail, ground miles. And so over the last 6 years, we've reduced that by 50%. And one of the ways we've done that is it's not necessarily telecommuting, but the maturity of the teleconferencing and the audio visual, bringing that face to a meeting versus just on a speakerphone, and how people feel so much more included. I'm sure some, not all of you participated on being either in a room where someone's on the phone or vice versa. And it really is a much different interaction versus having them up on a monitor and seeing them, hopefully dressed appropriately. But that's happened too. Some of our agents have heard things. But I think that technology has helped, whether it's even people working, in Calais and not wanting to drive into Montpelier because of the rain or snow or if a kid's sick or whatever, that they can feel much more ingrained and involved. Has matured a lot. And so we have, the technology that can help support that, and we invest in that and I think that reduces a lot of the air miles. I've consistently seen the air miles drop. I think that has really helped offset it, and hopefully that continues to mature.
So it's a very interesting mix of sizes of companies that we're talking about, and we can't escape the fact that transportation and how your employees get to work is hugely dependent on where your physical office is located, right? And I can see being a small firm, being in downtown Burlington on Main Street, has a lot of attractiveness to the people that work for you, and whereas Montpelier, there might be some a whole host of reasons why there's just not that much space in this state where you can have those choices, right? Are there ongoing conversations? Like I think of the EIC and I just think of, that space seems great if you're biking on the lake or for certain things, but it's not something automatic that I think it's great for a lot of transportation options. And I just wonder for all of you, in terms of thinking about your longer term future, would National Life consider a move to say Burlington or somewhere else where it's more accessible if it worked out? Or the EIC, if you grow to be a certain size, you think about where you want to be, or how do you look at the location of where you are?
Yeah, I do know when we created the space that we're in now at 128 Lakeside, we absolutely looked at location as where's the right place for us to be. And we have a set of criteria that we use whenever we build out office spaces. So we also have a small office in Barrie, and we did an assessment based on a whole host of factors, including transportation, to determine where was the right place for us to have an office in both Barrie and in Rutland, which are our other two very small satellite offices that represent where our customers are and where our staff live, and where it made sense for us to have spaces. In terms of our location in Burlington, I guess I would question and challenge whether or not that's I'm curious why you think that's not a good location. We do have bus route transportation right by our office. And one thing that we also have is we have fleet bikes. So for staff who do want to take a quick ride into town to run an errand, or over to Shaw's or Price Chopper to run an errand in the middle of the day, we do have that to accommodate that. But I'd say our location. I'm curious why our location. Why you asked the question about our location?
Because my partner works at dealer, and it's been that area has changed quite a bit. But before a number of things moved in, the choices of places to eat for employees, for example, were limited, and in some respect, it still kind of is. And so it's not just the trips getting there. It's you think about the things that are coalescing around there. And what are the options? Do people have to actually take a car out? You have to fleet of bikes for lunch trips for the maybe good weather days, but there are times when it's not as conducive. And had Pine Street not kind of grown up the way that it is, and maybe it's grown up because of employers like yourself and dealer, right? So some of those things are kind of feedback. So I'm just kind of curious about.
Yeah, it's on a very personal level. I live in Shelburne Village, and my husband works in downtown Burlington, and we actually carpool every day right up Shelburne Road. He would die to have my commute. His commute is twice as long as mine, and he works a mile and a half away from me. So it's all relative.
Sure.
It depends on where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think for us, we were very intentional. We wanted to be downtown. And we actually opened the office when we got to 3 employees. So it was myself and the founding partner of CX Associates, and we both just worked in our homes. And then we hired a third engineer who was working out of his home here in Burlington, and he finally said, I don't want to do this anymore, we need this. And so he was the driver. Both the principals were perfectly happy to work out of home offices. And so then we looked, and we decided we wanted to be downtown. And we lease space. We look at buildings to buy periodically, and that is absolutely, it's the radius to downtown Burlington. That's the point of interest. And as I mentioned, I think we have 4 or 5 employees who live in the city of Burlington. So they all, where we're located is basically driven by the fact that they all can be zero emissions commuters.
I think ours being a larger company, we recruit nationwide for some of our, our talent. So where most of us presumably love the state we live in and are here for whatever reason, whether it's personal, professional, or both. A lot of people don't want to live in Montpelier or Burlington. They're from New York or Boston or Philadelphia or Los Angeles, and that doesn't have as much to offer. So I think we recognize that. We are a Vermont-based business, been around for 160 years, rooted in Montpelier, and you're not going anywhere in that regard. But with telecommuting, technology, unfortunately air travel, we have many employees who are full-time employees that work in Iowa, in Ohio, in Utah, that whether they're people that have specific skill sets or just it's a good fit. We recognize that that's a solution. There's a lot of generational aspects. We have touched on this as far as people that a little older don't tend to embrace the technology or work from home as much. The younger generation wants that flexibility. It's the expectation. So for us, it's also a retention tool, a talent gathering and a retention tool that we can offer telecommuting with some of these integral key people that may come to our campus, hopefully as little as possible with air travel. So it is imperative for us to be able to offer that and support it and encourage it.
It's interesting you brought that up because there's two types of telecommuting, and we've discussed this internally. It's we live in a small state, there's a lot of talented people that may or may not live here, and how do we tap into those people? So you have that completely outside of Vermont full-time workforce, and then the other side of it is your Vermont-based workforce that you're offering it as a flexibility, as a work-life balance thing, as an incentive. So it's interesting you brought that up because I was going to ask if you've noticed that offering telecommuting, that helps with your recruitment, if it helps keep people on longer. I have pulled a couple more stats to kind of see what's going on. And when they polled people, they said 70% of employees report telecommuting to be somewhat to extremely important when choosing a job. And then 36% of employees would choose telecommuting over a pay raise. So there's actual value in dollar terms for people too. And then 46% of companies felt that allowing teleworking has reduced attrition rates for them. And then we talked about Gen X, how 68% of them are choosing jobs based on the flexibility to telecommute and work independently and have flexible schedules. So I guess I'll put the question back to you. Have you found that when you are hiring people, when people are interested in your company, that flexibility that you add is really attractive and maybe you're getting a better group because of that, and then keeping people on longer?
Take it first.
Sure, I think that when we recruit staff, being able to offer a flexible work environment that with a culture where we want to meet people where they are and allow them to achieve the work-life balance that's important for them is absolutely a driver for us. And I think staff who then you get to take advantage of the flexibility becomes a part of it, becomes really important for them. And so it's something that I think does keep people and makes people feel like they're more, it allows people to keep the balance that's important for them in ways that are important for them.
Yeah, I think it's an important recruiting tool. We, as a small engineering firm in a pretty competitive kind of strata of engineering, HVAC engineering, it is really hard to hire HVAC engineers. So we recruit nationally. We've hired people from New York, mainly from New York State. In general, our staff is quite young, and it's the flexibility. So telecommuting is one component of that, but there's no fixed work hours. There's, people do their jobs. That's the job. It's not be in the office from 8 to 5. That's not the job. So I think I think it's attractive when we can find people. Unfortunately, because of the type of work we do, where we go to building sites, so we go to National Light and do work there. And so we do need people to be physically located in Vermont, the engineering team that we work with. Perhaps we'll expand into Chicago where our operations officer works. We'll see.
And so for us, I think it absolutely is key. Mainly the younger generation, they want that flexibility from a retention perspective. In addition to hopefully a lot of the other things that we offer as an organization, healthy living and a lot of the tools and things that we can provide them. It's integral for us in a place where a lot of people don't have a difficult time relocating to, how we can ease that or eliminate that potentially.
So I work with a lot of businesses introducing ideas like telecommuting and biking and walking and any of those emission reduction ways to commute. But I come across a lot of managers, especially ones that have kind of been stuck in their ways for a while, who are very concerned about telecommuting and people working from home. And I just was wondering if it's all been so positive, which is wonderful, but has there been any issues or anything more on the negative side that you guys have faced with implementing these policies, and kind of how you combated them? And if it's nothing, wonderful, but I'm just wondering if we can maybe address some of those issues and how you've attacked them.
Yeah, there certainly are. This for managers that might be more, entrenched in some previous way and not as embracing the technology. I think my suggestion or what we've done, and it all is so individual based that it doesn't work for everyone. But it's really let someone try it. If you can quantify productivity, it makes it much easier. But I think in a lot of cases that is difficult. So it's having some trust, and it's giving it a trial. And hopefully it works out, but if not, recognize that it may not be the right fit. I know we've had people who wanted to work from home, or I should say thought they wanted to work from home, did that and voluntarily came back. They didn't do well, whether they were an extrovert and needed that physical, human contact. Whatever, their dog annoyed them, whatever, they have voluntarily chose not to do that for a myriad of reasons. So I think having the flexibility, knowing that things change and life changes, roles change, managers change, is good to at least let people try it. But it's not right for everyone, and nor will you always have managers that are willing to even give it a shot.
Yeah, I would say it was pretty easy, seeing as we founded the company as a teleworking company, for us to adopt a teleworking policy. So that wasn't really, there wasn't that management issue. The issues that we have seen are relatively minor. One of my current business partner actually can't take advantage of the policy because he has 2 small kids at home, and he really has no place to work at home. Mm-hmm. So there might be days when he would like to. There are days when we would like him to, when he's sniffling, but that's just something that doesn't work for him. So there's an equity, because we're always trying to have equity with our benefits. I wonder, just trying to look at it from the management perspective, if any of them have ever tried it. It's the doing it yourself first and seeing does it work and getting comfortable with what that would look like. Before you try and embrace a policy for employees. The other thing I think is that we are all firms with largely professional staff. So I think that there's potentially more concern for companies that have less skilled staff, shall we say. From my perspective, our employees are assigned projects. They're responsible for the projects. They have to do the budget. They manage the schedule. They know when they need quality control reviews, and other than that, they're expected to get the work done and keep their clients happy, and that's the job. So the exact hours they're working to do that job is actually not particularly of interest to me. So it's a philosophy, and that I'm sure it's a newer business philosophy. I worked at BEIC for 8 years before I came over to CX, so I got some of that from working at a progressive nonprofit, and was able to bring that into the business.
I think always asking the question why, to the manager, help me understand what your concern is. What are you afraid of? Just asking questions to really try to understand the issues. Even at BEIC, we have pockets of the organization where 40% of staff telecommute at least part of the time, and then pockets of the organization where people don't telecommute at all. And some of that is because to Tim's point, you can't be a facilities technician from home. You also can't be an HR person that works with people and employees all day and do that from home all the time. You can potentially some of the time. But then there are pockets of the organization where they just don't have the culture around working from home. And so it's just asking the question why and being open and encouraging people, I think, to try it and to model it and to measure it is helpful.
Erica, following up on that same line of thinking, you mentioned that while productivity was as good or better for the folks who are working from home, but there was somewhat less of a sense of engagement. We have one telecommuter full-time, and one of the things that we have struggled to do, or an emphasis on doing, I should say, in part just because we really like this employee, we want to stay around, is to overcome that engagement barrier. So I was wondering if you had tips on how you were working in that particular issue.
To the extent that you have technology helps. Using things like instant communicator and video conference as a way, rather than when you're talking to someone, you don't talk to them on the phone, you actually talk to them face to face. Making some intentional efforts to actively engage with the people who are telecommuting. When you asked the question, I immediately went not to a situation where someone was telecommuting, but where someone is working from a non-Vermont office as part of a Vermont-based team, or whether they're out of Southern Vermont or they're out of Washington, D.C. I think that making an intentional recommendation for the supervisor to maintain contact with that person every day. Asking other members of the team to intentionally make contact with the individuals every day. Finding opportunities for the person, if it's reasonable, to spend some face-to-face time, at least within some frequency, is important. So I think it's really around intention. Oftentimes it's, if the person's not there, you don't think about them. And so I know specifically within our HR team where we have one team member in Washington, D.C. and 7 people based in Vermont. I have one person who is part of their goals so that they're going to call the person in DC every single day. And it's just a way to maintain those types of connections. So it's around intention.
And to your point, I have to say that, Evie, I see we have this inter-office communicator, which have like green, red lights for where everyone is. And just having that up on your screen all day and knowing that you can kind of just ask someone a quick question that way, it makes them feel like they have a presence there, even though they're not. There, I don't know, it helps me a ton when I'm working from home. We use it all the time on our team. What is it? It's like a G chat basically, but it's secure and it's part of the EIC's system, and it's interlooped with our Outlook system. So it says like if you're in a meeting or if you're traveling or whatever, it kind of pops up on there as well. So you have an idea where the person is and if they're like available just to talk to you. But having that. Get something on your screen that shows where all your team members are, and it's really easy to ask them a question. I worked from home without that and with it, because actually we had problems with it the first week I worked there, but it makes a big difference, I think.
We can add you to ours. We have one. The young people are trying to make me do it.
So I guess I'm not one of the young people. Is that what you're saying?
Neither am I. I'm fine being conservative on technology.
I guess when you've all touched on this, but it's sort of the logistics question, right? So you have a teleworking policy in place. You have some employees where it works really well for, and some that it's not appropriate for their job description. How do you manage that?
For us, larger organizations, it's at the managerial level. So there's no edicts or mandates out there. So it really is an individual, whether it's the employee or the manager, it's an individual choice, and they need to, if there's some uncommon ground, they'll need to remedy that. Certainly we have, we call it people center, but in HR that may help if that's necessary. But it really is at the discretion of those individuals. And I imagine as we continue to grow, and that will continue to be the case, just given our work and the diversity of it and the size of it, that we'll still kind of maintain that sort of policy.
So for us, we use a Google Calendar, so everybody's on that calendar. People post when they're working remotely and their cell phone number. We have access to everybody's cell phone numbers also through Google Doc. And people in general don't need to request. We're a very flat organization, so people pretty much set it up. They might talk to me at the time they set it up, and so if he works from home on Thursdays, I tend to work from home on Wednesdays, unless I often commute to Massachusetts. So that's completely the opposite of where we want to go, but when I do that, then I tend not to be able to work at home because I'm already out of the office a couple of days a week. So people just, it's up there on the calendar. We have a Monday morning staff meeting where we're basically talking about the deadlines for the week and just reviewing kind of people's availability when they're working remotely. So that's also there. And we do use Google Chat for people who are remote, just to be able to be in touch with them. So logistically, that's it. I mean, there aren't really permissions, and we've never really encountered an issue. If we were to find somebody who we thought maybe was abusing the benefit, then that would just be a direct conversation with that individual to inquire, frankly, what's going on.
We're the same. It's a relationship between the manager and the employee to make the decision with someone like an HR person being willing to help remedy the situation if those two parties need extra help.
So we do a lot of studying of travel behavior and travel demand at the center here at UVM, and one of the things I think we need to be careful about is most of the benefits we're talking about here don't have to do with transportation and greenhouse gas emissions, and there are a lot of studies, probably over about the last 20 years about telecommuting, and some of what people do, in fact, a good hunk of what people do with the time they save from not commuting is just traveling to somewhere else, doing a different destination, which, was just mentioned. And so I think we need to be very, very careful when we use these greenhouse calculators and say, oh, this is the benefit of telecommuting. Yes, those miles are no longer associated with your company, but they may well be associated with the individual. So I'm wondering if any of you who sort of have been counting these metrics for a long time and sort of had in the back of your mind, well, we're kind of inflating the numbers here because I know that telecommuter actually went, to White River Junction for dinner that night because they didn't commute into Burlington, and so it ends up being a net zero gain.
We do track the whole picture for someone's personal greenhouse gas emissions, and over the first year that we measured our greenhouse gas emissions which was in 2007, and as of this past year, we're tracking 21% below what we tracked in 2007.
Right.
And so whether my statistic around gallons saved as attributed to telecommuting was 100% accurate for the overall picture, I don't know. But when you factor in flying and transportation and energy use, overall we're 20% better than what we were 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
So the survey that you send out, it's not specific, it also asks about the personal travel.
It's specifically about personal travel.
As I mentioned, we don't track, so it's something we gotta look at.
And we just do it for business related, not the total on number of ticks and those behaviors. But I think your point, they may be doing something else not at that level.
All right. Well, I want to thank my panel for coming in and sharing all this information. It is going to be recorded and up on the web, so we're excited to be able to offer that moving forward. And then as Clean Cities, if there's any way that I can help you increase your telecommuting or even track it, and I'm happy to help with that. So I guess we'll break and enjoy the beautiful day.